Yo, welcome back everybody to a brand new video here on the second channel, and Paldean Fates does come out tomorrow on Pokemon TCG Live. Now, while the set doesn't have an insane amount of new cards, and it's, going to change the metagame by that much, there are still some new cards that I wanted to look at, and I wanted to kind of see what the results in Japan were with these Paldean Fates cards. Japan has had Paldean Fates legal for quite some time, so they've had some time to toy around with some of the new cards in the set. And once again, Paldean Fates does not have that many good new cards in it, but it does still have a few, and it's going to be interesting to see how the metagame looks, because Japan has been playing our current future metagame here for a while. Of course, Japan is getting I think they're getting rotation and the new format this weekend, I'm pretty sure. So we are going to be able to see early rotation results from Japan very soon, which I am very excited to look at. But for now, we're going to look at Paldean Fates results from Japan, see what the new cards are impacting and how impactful they'll be, and see what decks the new cards are seeing the most amount of play in, and will that translate over here over on our side of the world. We'll have to see, but of course I'll leave a link down below to Pokecookbook, where I will be looking at all of these deck lists. And if you're new here to the second channel, make sure to subscribe down below and leave a like on the video if you go on to enjoy. And yeah, we got Paldean Fates coming out tomorrow, so definitely stay tuned on the main channel tomorrow. I'm going to be opening up some early Paldean Fates product. Probably going to stream tomorrow too, we'll have to see. But let's get into some results. So we are going to be looking here at some results here from Japan. Again, Paldean Fates doesn't have an insane amount of new cards in it, but it does still have some new cards, and we can look at. So, looking at some of these tournaments here from Japan, we are seeing stuff like Rapid Strike still being good. Rapid Strike will still be a good deck. There is a brand new card coming out that might make Rapid Strike slightly weaker into Gardevoir, and we're going to look at that in a sec here. But Rapid Strike winning a tournament, no surprise. We got Lost Tina, we got Miraidon. Miraidon doesn't really gain anything with this new set. But what does gain a new card is Gardevoir. Now, Moonlit Hill Stadium is a brand new stadium card that might make Gardevoir even better than it already is. So I think right now, if we're looking at the top three decks in the format, I think we can all agree it's Tina, Charizard, and then Gardevoir / Miraidon. But I think a lot of people would lean towards Gardevoir over Miraidon. Gardevoir does have a better matchup into stuff like Tina and Charizard, where Miraidon is a little bit more flimsy. But Gardevoir loses to Miraidon. Now, Gardevoir does also have a bit of a shaky Rapid Strike matchup. I think that's another matchup that's tough. Entei Valiant is another pretty scary matchup. But now Gardevoir gets to play the brand new Moonlit Hill Stadium, which allows you to discard a Psychic Energy from your hand and then heal 30 damage from, I think, all of your Psychic Pokemon, which is pretty insane. Moonlit Hill Stadium is a very strong card for Gardevoir. It is probably the most impactful new card from the new set. Like, of all the brand new cards, I think we can all agree Moonlit Hill Stadium is going to be the strongest new card from the new set that will really make its impact within Gardevoir. And it could put Gardevoir over the top. The other big thing with Moonlit Hill, of course, is it does allow you to pull off your Shining Arcana Gardevoirs a whole lot easier. You're able to, abuse Shining Arcana Gardevoir thanks to a Moonlit Hill. If you're healing 30 from it, that means you can put an extra energy onto your Gardevoir, because Shining Arcana Gardevoir, you can only put 6 energy on it, right? Because it's only got 140 HP with Gardevoir EX's ability. When you play Moonlit Hill Stadium, you can then heal 30 from it, which allows you to put another energy on it. And then with Reversal, you're doing a lot of damage. So we might start seeing more Shining Arcana Gardevoirs, like as we see this build here place 3 of them, because of how strong Moonlit Hill Stadium is. It's just also a way to heal your Pokemon, which is also really, really good. Moonlit Hill Stadium is a very, very powerful card, and definitely is going to make an impact within Gardevoir. We got more Tina stuff. We are seeing Charizard. Charizard doesn't really gain any new cards. I think, honestly, stuff like Tina and Gardevoir, they could get a bit weaker thanks to Gardevoir. I mean, Gardevoir is a deck that tends to have a good Tina and a good matchup against Charizard. Now, this Charizard deck here does play the new Charmeleon, if you can see the new Charmeleon there. The new Charmeleon does have an ability where when it is in play, you prevent all effects of attacks onto it. So basically, the Charmeleon has a built-in Jirachi for stuff like Sableye and Medicham. Now, the debate is, will the Charmeleon be worth playing over the one that does 70 damage, but doesn't have the Jirachi ability? The problem with the new Charmeleon here, as you can see, its ability is really good, and obviously you can put it into play against Sableye without it getting Lost Mind, which is huge. The problem is you only do 50 damage with your attack. So if you're playing against Control, you're going to have a worse time because you can't one-shot the Mimikyu with the Charmeleon, which is something you can do with the other Charmeleon. So I'm not sure the new Charmeleon is going to be that good. That is another brand new card in Paldean Fates that might have a smallish impact within the meta. Looking through here, we do have a really cool Lost Box Roaring Moon Sablezard deck. Not playing that one brand new card that Lost Box might gain. We do have another tourney here, the winning deck being Roaring Moon. Roaring Moon is on the rise right now in our current format. It did pretty good in Charlotte, so we're going to probably see a lot more Moon. We got a cool Serena EX deck here doing well. We got Goldengo Palkia, another deck that's on the rise. I don't think the deck gains anything with the new set. Doesn't really get better or worse. I mean, it could have a decent Guardy matchup because you do have Greninja Cologne, which is like a pretty good combo to have. So maybe the deck stays good. We have this really interesting Arc Pile. So the first thing you'll notice here is Arceus with TM Crisis Punch. Now this is where the new cards really make an impact. Now Cramorant, Cramorant, pretty good card. Pretty strong card to play right now. TM Crisis Punch makes Cramorant super, super strong. So TM Crisis Punch is a TM card that you can attach, and the attack does 280 damage for 3 energy. However, the attack can only be used if your opponent has exactly 1 prize card remaining. So if your opponent has 1 prize remaining, you put the TM Crisis Punch onto your Cramorant, you can do 280 damage for free, which is insane. And this is where the TM Crisis Punch is going to make a big deal. Now, obviously, I don't think this Arc Cram deck is going to be like that good over here, more of a meme. But the idea of TM Crisis Punch and Cramorant is a very good combo. And, you can play within the Lost Zone engine decks, which is probably where you're going to see the TM see the most amount of play. Because you literally have like a mini Charizard, like a mini Radiant Charizard with that Crisis Punch Cramorant combo. But honestly, if that the Crisis Punch Cram combo becomes more relevant, we could see it be splashed into random stuff. I mean, obviously, Arc Piles, could fit a card like that. Like, it's possible that, a bunch of decks could start innovating and trying out Cramorant Crisis Punch. So I did want to kind of give a shout to that. But we do have a Sablezard deck here. This is probably going to be the normal way we're going to see Crisis Punch see play with Cramorant, and that's going to be with the Lost Zone, specifically a single prize Lost Box deck, because if you're not playing any 2-prizers, your opponent is forced to go down, well, unless you're playing against Iron Hands, obviously. Your opponent most of the time is going to be forced down to 1 prize card, so a lot of the time they will walk in to the Crisis Punch. The few things I'll say about Crisis Punch, though, is it better than having another TM Devo in the deck? Because as you can see, this Sablezard list here plays 1 TM Devo and 1 Crisis Punch. But I will say Crisis Punch will be good against even, Charizard EX, because you can use it to one-shot the Pidgeot at the end of the game. If your opponent is playing Charizard and there's still a Pidgeot EX in play that you have either not de-evolved yet or whatever, you can at least Crisis Punch, Counter Catcher, KO Pidgeot. Crisis Punch within Sablezard might be a brand new one of, will it see play over the double TM Devo? Because theoretically, you can play Crisis Punch in any Lost Zone deck. You could play it in like Kyogre if you really wanted to, even if that's not really relevant. Crisis Punch is a very good card, and it might make the Charizard matchup a lot better for these Lost Box decks, because now all of a sudden you have this big late-game attack that can do 280 damage. You can 2-shot a Charizard. You can put, 5-6 damage counters on a Charizard with Lost Mine, and then finish it off with a Crisis Punch. You can, again, Crisis Punch does 280 damage. You can knock out the Pidgeot EX if that hasn't been KO'd yet. And this also helps a lot against Arceus V-Star, which has always been a tough matchup for these Sablezard decks, mainly because Arceus is so bulky. They usually play Charon's Care, Heavy Judge, Pat the Peak. It gets a little awkward to knock out multiple V-Stars, but now that there's a way to just do a nice clean 280 damage, it's going to be really good against bulkier Pokemon in the format, like Arceus, like Palkia, even something like Lugia. And another big one Crisis Punch could be good against is obviously going to be something like Goldengo. So I don't know. It's a really cool card to have in Sablezard. We'll have to see how much of an impact it makes. We'll see if there's any more Crisis Punch decks here to look at. We're going to kind of skim through most of these. I mean, a lot of the format is kind of the same over in Japan, because, I mean, the Paldean Fates meta doesn't add that many new cards. We're seeing kind of our results translate over here. We do have this really cool Kyogre Paradox box deck. It doesn't play Crisis Punch, but it is playing 2 different Hoopas. One Hoopa that can be good against Urshifu, which is kind of smart, and then we got the other Hoopa. That's a really cool deck list. I like this. I like it. I like the idea of the double Hoopa idea. Because, yeah, you get the one Hoopa, which can be good against Rapidash Urshifu, because it's a Psychic type. And then you have the other Hoopa that can be good against Iron Hands and Miraidon. That's a really cool Lost Box deck. I'm a fan. I rate it. Maybe I'll do a video on this deck, because I'm a huge fan of that. I like it. Sick deck. We got Snorlax, obviously, which doesn't really get any better with the new set. I don't think it gains any new cards with Paldean Fates, other than a really cool new Mimikyu card that is a nice little illustrator rare you can rock within your deck. We got more Guardy here with that Moonlight Hill. Again, the Moonlight Hill, just a very good card in Gardevoir. The other thing, too, you can use it with Zacian V. You can put Moonlight Hill in play for Zacian V, which could be relevant. Sometimes Zacian V is a very good attacker because it's a stronger card than Gardevoir because you can put more energy on it, because you can put more damage on it because it has more HP than Gardevoir. But there's times where you can actually use Moonlight Hill to potentially keep your Zacian out of range from getting knocked out super easily, which is kind of an interesting concept to think of. So definitely a card that Guardy can play. We got more Lugia shenanigans. Lugia theoretically could play Crisis Punch. I don't think it will, but it could. It could. We got the colorless Lugia box here. See what else we got here. More Goldengo stuff. Again, Guardy with the Moonlit Hill. Now, I guess the other question is, how many Moonlit Hill are you going to be playing within your Gardevoir deck? Are you going to be playing only one, or are you going to play two? Because it is a very valuable card. And again, the ability to heal your Pokemon is also going to be good in matchups, like even against like decks, like Sableye. If you don't get Jirachi down, Sableye can be an issue. Obviously, it can be good against Rapid Strike and Iron Valiant. Any of those like mini spread decks can get hurt by the Moonlit Hill Stadium. So starting to make me wonder, is Moonlit Hill going to see playing two ofs, or is it going to be played in one of? This build here does play 2 copies of Moonlit Hill Stadium. So it is interesting to think about how popular, how high of quantities is the Moonlit Hill going to see play. We got an interesting Mew Selgor deck here, trying to counter the Roaring Moon and the Charizard. I don't hate this. If both Moon and Charizard are going to be seeing more play, maybe it's worth trying out Mew Selgor again. This was like a deck that did get some day 2s at LEIC, but we haven't really seen a Mew Selgor since, so it's starting to make me wonder, is it something worth revisiting in our current format? That's one thing to kind of keep in mind here. We got Tina with Shaman. Could be good. Again, with Roaring Moon and Zard's popularity, could be worth playing. Maybe, maybe not. All right, let's see what else we got here. We got another cool Lost Zone at Paradox box deck. Playing Zamazenta is interesting. I don't hate that. Obviously, Shenpao's not really that popular right now, but Zam's still a really good one-prize attacker. Still got that Hoopa Moon in the deck, which I quite like. It's a cool idea. Cool concept. All right, let's see what else we got here. We got an interesting Arctina deck playing a Golurk V, which can de-evolve your opponent's active Pokemon. I guess that's pretty helpful against Charizard. I don't hate it. The only problem is you only get 1 prize for KOing the Charmander when you de-evolve it, but I guess it's a cool concept. I like it. I rate the idea. More Guardy here with Moonlit Hill. Again, not that many new cards in the set, but cards like Moonlight Hill are going to be very good to have in the format for the Lost Zone deck. We got an interesting Arctina Leafeon deck here. Playing some interesting cards like it's playing, I think that's, pretty sure that's Jock there. There's a Snow Leaf Badge, which gets rid of weakness. That could be pretty relevant, actually, against Charizard EX, because now they're starting to put the Radiant Charizard back into the deck, which is kind of unfortunate for these Arc Grass Pile decks. Playing, actually, League Headquarters, prioritizing that over Path is definitely an interesting way to go about it. Got another like Kyogre Moon deck here. Not playing Crisis Punch, but again, you do have Kyogre as your big late game attacker, which kind of, I guess, is just better than Crisis Punch in some scenarios. We'll see what else we got here. We got a Zorobox deck that did well in a tournament over in Japan. Zorobox, I don't think gains any new stage 1s, but it's still a deck that I think is decent. You do have good type coverage with Scovillain, Cleaver, Scizor, Jolteon is really good against Pidgeot, and even Palkia, which we're seeing a little bit more of in Goldengo. Really cool deck. I'm a big fan of Zorobox. I'm always happy to see Zorobox do well. I do want to see Zorobox have a good run at regionals. It did get day 2 in Charlotte. Want to see it go a bit farther. We got a traditional Sableye Cram Zam deck here, not really going into the Paradox Pokemon, just still playing the Zamazenta in the deck that does a nice clean 220 damage, which isn't terrible. I guess you can like hit for 220 and then like soften up, finish off with like Sableye down the road. We got an Arc Regidrago deck here. Could be good in the format. Obviously, Regidrago does have the ability to copy stuff like Goodra, which is good. Only playing 4 dragons, though. Giratina, Goodra, Duraludon, and Altaria, which forces your opponent to go to sleep, which is interesting. Is the Guardy list here not playing Moonlit Hill, actually playing 3 copies of Artisan, but also playing a Mimikyu in the deck. That's an interesting concept, I guess. Got Miraidon with a TM Devolution. That's also kind of an interesting concept for sure. We got a very interesting Shenpao Baxcalibur Palkia deck playing Pidgeot. So a bit more of a teched out Shenpao deck here. Palkia is not terrible in Shenpao. One of Shenpao's biggest issues is obviously its consistency and setting up. Having Palkia might not be terrible right now because it does give you a nice big, beat stick attacker, which, there is some value in that in my opinion. So that's interesting. Japan always likes to think outside the box with their decks. Like if you see another Shenpao Iron Hands deck playing the one of Palkia, which I honestly don't hate. It gives you another attacker in the deck that could be good in the early game, which could be pretty helpful. All right, we got another Sablezard deck here with that Crisis Punch TM. Another card that I think, again, could be good within Sablezard. But again, Crisis Punch could be good in, like, the normal Lost Box decks, like the Paradox builds we're looking at with, like, Roaring Moon and Iron Hands. Because as long as you're, like, manipulating the prize trade, where even if you just attack with a two-prize or once, you can then lean into the late game Crisis Punch. So there is still some potential for that, too. Not just in the Sablezard deck. So you kind of want to keep that in mind here. When looking at some of these decks, we got another Sablezard with the TM Crisis Punch once again. Crisis Punch with Cram's a pretty good combo. All right, here we go. We got an Espathra EX deck. Now, we're going to look at Espathra EX list in a minute, but its ability makes it so that basic Pokemon, I think it's when it's in the active spot, the Pokemon need one more energy to attack. So the new Espathra does look like it could be a pretty interesting new deck when it comes out. We do see an interesting Shadow Rider Espathra deck. The Espathra is a grass type, keep in mind, so you do have an attacker that helps against Charizard EX. Even though you are playing something like Shadow Rider Calyrex, which usually loses to Charizard, you just don't use it. You just don't put the Shadow Rider in play, and you lean into the Arceus and the Espathra. But the Espathra EX definitely looks interesting. We are going to look at some Espathra decks, because it is one of the only brand new cards within Paldean Fates, so we are going to give it a look. All right, here we go. We do have the Paradox Lost Box deck playing the Crisis Punch. So like I said, you can use like Hands or Moon early on, get those like 2 prizes with those, and then if you just attack with Sableye and Cram for the rest of the match, you can then lean in to that Crisis Punch in the late game instead of giving your opponent an easy 2-prizer. So you can make your opponent go through all these Pokemon and then kind of at the end of the game use Cramorant and Crisis Punch to kind of end the game off. And I kind of like that idea of leaning into the Crisis Punch for the Cramorant in the Paradox Box deck. Because Paradox Box, I think, is a really strong deck, but it does really struggle against stuff like Charizard because while you do have Roaring Moon, you usually get one chance of using the Moon because they'll like Lost City it. They have Iona, which makes it tough. Yeah, and they have the Jirachi, which is pretty annoying. You can't use Sableye. That's why we're seeing the Glasses Lost Box deck be so good, and that's because Glasses Lost Box does have a lot of different ways to KO Charizard in one hit, whereas like the more Paradox build here doesn't really have great answers to Charizard apart from just Moon, and then early Iron Hands, I guess, could be good if you can pull it off quick enough before they evolve. But I guess you can use Hands against Pidgeot. But that's what I'm saying. Crisis Punch could be really good within the Paradox Box deck. Because then you don't have to put a 2-prizer in play near the end of the game where Charizard takes an easy 2-prize KO. And you can lean into that like 2-shot with Crisis Punch and like Cram or Sableye or something. So I do like the idea of Crisis Punch in Paradox Box. It actually could be one of the missing pieces that Paradox Lost Box needs to actually be a good deck, in my opinion. Because there is some potential for that to be good, in my opinion. We got an interesting TM Evozar deck here, playing the new Charmeleon, 2 copies of the new Charmeleon, and actually not even playing a Jirachi in the deck. You can see this build here does not play any Jirachi, and I guess maybe that's because you got the double Charmeleon. I don't know if that's really going to make a difference, but we'll see if the new Charmeleon does see play within Charizard. All right, there were a lot of decks to look at there, but a lot of them were just kind of repeats. I didn't want to go through like the exact same like 60s for Charizard and Giratina over and over again there, but it is now time to look at some lists for Espathra EX. Now, this card does have a really cool ability. Like I said, we looked at it earlier with that Shadow Rider deck. It's got that ability where as long as it's in the active spot, attacks used by your opponent's active Pokemon does cost 1 colorless more. Now, that can be a very evil ability. Combine that with League Headquarters and Crushing Hammer. You could have yourself a pretty annoying attacker. And then its attack Psyball does 30 damage plus 30 more damage for each energy on both active Pokemon. I think this is actually a semi-playable card. And we're going to look at some lists here from Japan. So we do see that Arc Shadow Rider build we just looked at. Another popular way that it might see play is going to be with Xatu. Now, Xatu does seem like one of the more consistent partners to play, because Xatu is not a Shadow Rider. It's not a 3-prize liability you'll have him play. Unfortunate for Shadow Rider fans, but we'll play Shadow Rider for the rotation eventually. But I do think Xatu is probably just a lot better because, again, you're not using a 3-prize liability. You do have that Grass Tacker. You just have a natural good matchup against Charizard. You're going to force Charizard to have to put 3 energy onto their active. Charizard usually tends to play 6 to 7 energies right now. And if they have to commit 3 energy to a Charizard, it just ain't feeling pretty good for them. Not to mention, Roaring Moon would need 4 energy to KO you. Like, just think of any deck, like Goldango needing 2 energy can be kind of interesting. Arceus needing 4 energy to attack you. There's a lot of really cool combos for Espathra. Now, obviously, if you're playing against a deck with Path the Peak, it could get annoying. But even stuff like Miraidon needing 4 energy, like if you're playing against Miraidon without Path, them needing 4 energy to hit you with Photon Blaster is pretty bad. So that's one big thing. And I think Xatu does seem like a good way. You can play it with like other Pokemon. If you're playing Xatu, you can play it with Mew EX. You can play it with Mimikyu, like this build here. You can also play the single prize Espathra, which has that ability when you evolve it. It doesn't take any damage from attacks, and it does 140 if there's a Tulip in your discard pile. So you do get a nice Psychic attacker. I'm not sure the baby Espathra is going to be that good to play. Like the One Prizer could be okay, but I might just rather prefer the Grass. Like just play the EX Pokemon, because you can always just play other big Psychic attackers. Like I think Mew EX is a fantastic card to play in the deck. There's like a Lost Zone version here on Pokebook. I like this idea too. A Lost Box build doesn't seem bad because you have this nice big Grass attacker for Charizard, because that's one of Lost Zone's harder matchups right now is Charizard. I mean, you do have the TM Devos, you got the Roaring Moons. Again, Crisis Punch could help the Zard matchup a little bit more too. But also just having Espathra might not be terrible. It's a nice big attacker. It's a grass Pokemon. That can be good. This build does play Path, which, I mean, you probably don't want to put Path in play, though, because it would shut off your own ability, but I do like the idea of, like, a Lost Box build of Espathra. Toadskruel with Espathra doesn't seem bad either. It is playing Path with the Rocks, which I guess if you're playing the Rocks with the Path, you don't shut off your own ability. And then we got another Lost Box build here, as you can see. This one is playing Kyogre and Hands and Moon, and the 1/1 Espathra. And that does give you, again, a good Grass attacker. It does need Psychic Energy. You're already playing Psychic Energy in the deck because you already play Sableye, so why not? So this build I also don't hate either. It gives you a Grass attacker for the Zard matchup. Doesn't seem terrible. It helps against Zard, can help against Moon. But yeah, I do think the best way to play will probably be with Xatu. But again, in a Lost Box build, it doesn't seem bad. Another build here of Espathra with the Lost Zone engine, playing Cramorant, playing that Crisis Punch TM, which is pretty sick too, within the deck. So you get some firepower, you get some grass coverage for Charizard and Roaring Moon. Not a bad idea. Gardevoir could technically play it. I don't know if you would need to play it in Gardevoir, but you could. I mean, if you want to play it in Gardevoir, you theoretically could. You can, attach energy to it from hand. Only needs 1 energy. You could build it up before you evolve it. You can put energy on the Flittle before you evolve it into Espathra, and then you can use it as a grass Pokemon against Charizard EX. It's probably not going to be that good against Charizard, though, but, I mean, the option is there. It could be a cool tech card in Gardevoir. Just saying. Could be something to consider. I mean, we've seen Deoxys V-Star. We got Espeon VMAX you could play in the deck, too. It would help against, Lost Box. Another Lost Box build. Another Xatu build here of Espathra. Another Xatu build. Another Guardy build. I mean, the idea of playing in Guardy doesn't seem terrible. Once again, another Lost Zone build. Playing of the Radiant Charizard in the deck, too, as a nice big beach stick attacker. Again, I don't hate it. Like, Crisis Punch, Charizard, Espathra in one deck might not be a terrible idea. Just more Xatu builds here to look at. Because that's like kind of the default way to play it, I think. But I do like the idea of playing it with the Lost Zone too. Now, this build I also like. So this one seems kind of cool. So you can play Crisis Punch, which I guess you could theoretically play. But you can also play Crushing Hammer. And I think Crushing Hammer is going to be worth it in the deck. Well, technically, you do less damage with your Espathra because you're using Crushing Hammer to remove an energy. You're also making it harder for your opponent to attack you because of your ability. So I think Crushing Hammer could be a card you could also play in the deck too. In the Xatu build. But yeah, a lot of Xatu builds. We got another Shadow Rider build, an Iron Valiant Shadow Rider build. That's kind of cool. Got some Lost Zone builds here of Espathra, but Espathra definitely does look like a pretty promising new card to keep your eye on in the new set for sure. So definitely keep your eye on Espathra. It's probably the most like playable of the 3 new EX cards. We're gonna look at one new deck here with one of the new EXs. But I think Espathra is actually a pretty playable card. I don't hate it. I think it's pretty playable. I like the list we saw. The Xatu build, the Lost Zone build seems kind of cool too. We'll have to see. All right, and the last new EX I wanted to look at here with Paldean Fates decks from Japan is the brand new Great Tusk EX. This is probably the other semi-playable EX. I think, like, Espathra is, like, the best EX, but Great Tusk ain't too bad either, I guess. It is an ancient Pokemon, and I think that's better right now than the Iron Treads. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any Iron Treads decks from Japan. But Great Tusk, I think, is actually, like, kind of playable. Now, it does have a fighting type. It's an ancient Pokemon. Once again, you can play it with stuff like Sada. Like, we have limited ancient cards right now until Temporal Forces. This card definitely gets a lot better with Temporal Forces. Same thing with the Iron Treads. It's a little too early to really play these cards at their full value, but with the early list where we got from Japan, if you just want to play something different and fun and new, instead of just playing the same old boring stuff, you could just play a great Tusk deck right now. So it does have that ability, Quaking Demolition. Once you're at the end of your turn, after you attack, if this Pokemon is in the active spot, you must discard the top 5 cards of your deck. That's a pretty bad ability, but you do have a great attack with Great Bash that does a nice big 260 damage. And this attack's damage isn't affected by any effects, which is nice. It's got a built-in shred. 260 damage is really good. You're knocking out most basic EXs. You're KOing Miraidons and Iron Hands because they're already weak to fighting. And that's a lot of damage to do. Once again, you are an ancient Pokemon. So let's take a look at the few lists I could find here from Pokebook with Great Tusk. So we got this Great Tusk deck here. Playing the Brute, Bonnet in the deck, and Path. So I think the first thing you'll notice when playing a Great Tusk, I think you gotta play it with Path of the Peak, because otherwise you're just going to have to mill the top 5 cards of your deck, which a lot of the time can be pretty bad. I mean, there's been times where milling with Single Strike Tyranitar has been pretty devastating, and milling with Great Tusk could also be devastating. So I think combining it with Path does give you that little bit of insurance. So you get to do 260 damage, and you don't have to worry about discarding the top 5 cards of your deck. There will probably be games where that does happen, but at the same time, you at least will have a couple, maybe turns where you don't do that. And again, you can easily build up Great Tusk here with Professor Sada's Vitality. This build here from Japan does play Sada. Plays Dark Energy. You can probably play with Roaring Moon, to be honest. Like, I think you could probably fit Roaring Moon with Great Tusk, too. It doesn't seem terrible. And then we got another list here. This one is all about the fighting attackers within the deck here. The fighting Pokemon within the Great Tusk deck here. Really leaning into its main kind of trait of being a fighting Pokemon and an ancient Pokemon, where you have some energy acceleration in the form of the Professor Sada's Vitality. You can play it with Gutsy Pickaxe to get energy on it. You have Raihan. One card I do like in this build is actually the 2 of Double Turbo. You can put Double Turbo on Great Tusk, and while it's only going to be doing 240, 240 is still the great number to hit. You're still hitting, enough to knock out, like, Roaring Moons and stuff with 230 HP, so I still don't hate the idea of this. The fighting build seems okay. You also get to play Slitherwing in the deck, so you get another, like, 1-prize attacker, which could be good. So I actually don't hate the idea of playing Great Tusk with Slitherwing. You can play it with that ancient booster capsule, which is pretty decent. I mean, Great Tusk does have 250 HP. You put that capsule on it, it's going to have over 300 HP, and you're hitting already, like, really, really high numbers with Great Tusk. So I think Ancient Booster Capsule with Great Tusk is already a really cool concept. So that's another list I liked, kind of leaning more into the fighting aspect of Great Tusk, and then having this build here, which again, you could just probably slot Roaring Moon in this deck over the Brute Bonnet and stuff. You could probably fit Roaring Moon into this Great Tusk deck here if you really wanted to, and maybe Great Tusk will see play as a one of in some Roaring Moon. I mean, we've seen Roaring Moon with Water Energy and Iron Hands right now, playing different energy types because it's just so versatile with Sada, and maybe you can do the same. You can fit a Great Tusk in your Roaring Moon deck as a nice 1-prize attacker. Milling the top 5 cards isn't good. You know what? Maybe we can see Great Tusk within Kyogre decks too. That could be a cool idea. What about a Lost Box Great Tusk deck where you can use Great Tusk to help you get to Kyogre even quicker? You just take a big knockout, you just Mirage Gate to it, do a big 260 damage, knock out your opponent's active Pokemon, mill the top 5 cards of your deck, and then you can get to Kyogre super quickly. So, yo, we're cooking, man. I'm already looking at 3 different builds of Great Tusk for content ideas. I'm trying to make the most of the limited options we got from Paldean Fates. But there you have, folks. Those are some brand new Paldean Fates decks. Again, Great Tusk seems to be semi-playable. Obviously, Espathra is a very decent card. I think it is probably the most playable of the EXs. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw somebody play some kind of Espathra deck or a deck with Espathra EX in it in getting day 2 at a regionals, or even doing well in an online tournament for that matter. I think it is a playable card. Playing it with Xatu, playing it with Lost Zone actually seems kind of reasonable. Having it with Crushing Hammer seems good. And then, of course, we looked at some early results from Japan here. Again, a lot of these decks are like stuff we've already seen over here in the West, but there are still some cards here, or some decks, like, again, the Moonlit Hill Stadium, the Crisis Punch, stuff like that are all going to be impactful within our new format. But there you have, folks. Those are some brand new Paldean Fates decks from Japan. Let me know what you thought of the Paldean Fates decks in the comments below. What card are you most looking forward to from Paldean Fates? I would be interested to hear. Are you excited for Crisis Punch? It does seem like Lost Zone does get some pretty cool new partners with the new set. Are you looking forward to Moonlit Hill? Do you think Moonlit Hill is going to put Gardy on top? For the limited time, we're going to be able to use Moonlit Hill with Shining Arcana Gardevoir. I'm interested to hear down in the comments below. I'll leave a link to Pokebook if you want to go look at some these decks for yourself and build them tomorrow when these cards go live on Pokemon TCG Live. That'll be for me. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like. If you're new to the channel, once again, subscribe down below and all the good stuff, and I'll catch you all in another video. Stay tuned for a big pack opening video on the main channel tomorrow where we open up some early Paldean Fates. Have a good rest of your day. Bye-bye.